Hello, welcome to my channel, another Bibliophile Reads. My name is Greg, and I am doing the Yes Chef book tag created by Kaitlin at Bandy's Books. This is a pretty unique tag because it is all about food and books. And Kaitlin created it because she's a professional chef and she's a book reader, so she sort of merged those two interests into one. And I think it's kind of interesting. I'm not a big eater, and I'm not a chef, but I'm going to go ahead and see how well I can do. This tag has 8 prompts. Number 1, have you ever read a book about or written by a chef? If so, which ones did you enjoy? As far as I know, I have not read a book written by a chef, at least a professional chef. I know there's something in the back of my mind about some book that I read some years ago, who the woman who wrote it may have been a chef. I was looking through my list of books that I've read over time, and I couldn't identify it. So that's a maybe, but if it doesn't stick out in my brain, I'm going to just have to say that's a no. Prompt number 2. Do you notice food descriptions in books? Why or why not? I do notice them, but they just sort of pass me by most of the time because of course I eat, but I'm not a food connoisseur. I am not a foodie. So it is just a description to me. A lot of times you read descriptions about like what clothes someone is wearing. An author will often point out that the brand name of the jeans that they're wearing, Levi's or Lee or whatever, and that totally passes me by. I don't attach any significance to brand names or clothes or what type of clothes someone is wearing unless it's integral to the plot. Now with food, again, the author may be communicating something that the author knows about that particular food to the reader, and if the reader's really attuned, they're going, okay, if the character is eating okra or watermelon or cheese balls or whatever, that's being significant to the character development. But that usually just passes me by, and only if it's something totally out of the ordinary will I pick up on food descriptions. Now, I know that is different from some readers. I know my wife was reading some books, and she says, when I read this book, there's this delicious food description. I want to go cook it. I said, well, okay, go cook it. She usually doesn't, but people who really love food are more attuned to those descriptions, and unfortunately, I'm not. Number 3, what book have you read that had the best food description? Now, I'm going to interpret best as most memorable. This is definitely not a food that I would want to eat or I would suggest anyone sampling. And oddly enough, this food came from 2 different books. One was a novel and one was a work of nonfiction. I read the novel first, and then many years later, I read the nonfiction work and going, that author basically stole the scene from the nonfiction work. Now, the nonfiction work, which I read second, was The Mole People, Life in the Tunnels Beneath New York City by Jennifer Toth. And in this, she is describing homeless people in the tunnels beneath New York City. And there is a scene where the homeless people are cooking up over a spit some track rabbit. Now, there are no rabbits in the tunnels of New York City, but there are rats. And the homeless people had skewered a rat and were roasting it over an open fire. And they were eating it. Now, again, I'm going to say, I don't think anyone should eat a rat in New York City. But people do that because that's where they're sort of forced to live, and that is the food that they have available. That in itself is very telling, that people can be so reduced in their circumstances that they will eat track rabbit. Now, the novel that I read first was Reliquary by Douglas Preston and is it Lee Child? Can't remember the second author, but that is a second or a follow-up to the book The Relic, which is about a monster running around a New York museum, Metropolitan Museum. And in this, the detective is investigating killings that are leading him into the subways. And he has a scene in that book very much like the scene in The Mole People. It's to the point where I think the authors were either heavily inspired. I won't say they lifted it or plagiarized it, because that's a work of journalism, and they're just describing what goes down in those tunnels. But it was just eerily similar. Again, the detective, pretending to be homeless, sits down for a meal of track rabbit. Number 4, have you ever been inspired by a book, not a cookbook, to prepare a specific food or meal? Not exactly, but somewhat. This is my wife's book, Animal, Vegetable, and Miracle, by Barbara Kingsolver. And this is an attempt for a family to eat food that they produce themselves instead of commercially grown or commercially bought food. And it was very inspirational to my wife, and she got me to read it, although I listened to the audiobook and I didn't read this copy. And it got her much more into growing her own vegetables and raised gardens. It also started us, when we were living in Washington State, to join a chicken co-op, where I had to go out once a week and help take care of the chickens so we could get some free eggs. And it was a learning experience. And one of the biggest things that I learned is that I should never be a farmer, that I need to stay away from that sort of lifestyle where you grow your own food, prepare your own food, and raise farm animals. I took away the exact opposite from this book, is that I'm okay with commercially grown food and commercially bought food. But it was an interesting look into a different way of looking at food. Number 5, do you have a favorite cookbook? No. My wife is the cook of the family. Occasionally, I have to cook my own meals. I know during the summer, my wife likes to play pickleball, and she will always tell me, dinner on your own, because she's out playing pickleball during dinner time. So a lot of times I have to scrounge and make my own meals. And in that case, I just look up stuff on the internet for a quick recipe, if I need a recipe. Last time I did that, about 2 weeks ago, was for meatloaf. I looked up a recipe online, followed it, made a meatloaf. It was fine, nothing special. Did a little bit of modifications on my own. I know the recipe called for 1.5 pounds of hamburger. And I did 1 pound of hamburger and 1/2 pound of Jimmy Dean sausage. Just sort of off the cuff change. But no, I don't own any cookbooks. My wife owns some, but they're all hers. Number 6, if you could share a meal with one author, dead or alive, who would that be? Well, I have shared a beer with William T. Vollmann. He is known for writing these huge, enormous novels of Europeans and Americans interacting with the Native Americans. It has The Ice Shirt, Fathers and Crows, The Dying Grass. And when I was living in Seattle, he came to do a book tour. And after, he'd done his signing and speaking, he invited people to join him at a pub for a beer. And I got to go to the pub. I sat next to him, and I had a beer. Now, I did not get to talk to him a whole lot, even though I was sitting next to him, because he was talking to a lot of different people. But I would like to recreate that experience, but have less people so I could talk to him directly and have our beers and whatever meal that we want. I think he would go for Mexican. I think that would be good. Number 7, if you had 24 hours to live and you could eat one meal and read one book, what would you eat and what would you read? Well, I'm going to stay local and very simple for my meal. I would go to a restaurant near me called Sai Tong Para Thai. Of course, they're a Thai restaurant. And the chef has her own unique dish called Sai Tong Spicy Noodles. It is a noodle dish with some minced chicken. It has some peppers and onions, and it has this just marvelous spicy flavor to it that is just absolutely delicious. And I figure, why not go that? I don't need a big fancy meal, even if I only have 24 hours to live. And it is so delicious that I'm going to try to convince my wife to go out there tonight, because it's Friday night and we usually eat out on Friday nights. Sai Tong Spicy Noodles. And the book that I would read, I'm going to go with A Confederacy of Dunces by John Kennedy Toole, because that's absolutely hilarious. And I could go the 23rd hour. My valve! Why not? Prompt number 8, tag some friends. I am going to do Bad is Rad 2. I don't know what kind of food she likes. Mexican, maybe? I think she's mentioned Mexican. Second time Mexicans have mentioned in this video. I'm going to do Alan, Big Hard Books and Classics, because he's definitely going to understand that valve problem in my 23rd hour. And lastly, I am going to do Mark at Book Time with Elvis, just because I've heard him talk about Czech beer a lot. Well, beer's kind of a food, isn't it? Maybe. So thank you for watching, and keep on reading.